It's such a pleasure to have a program where you can just look and see how historical things moved through the Bible. And my good brother Scott Smith has developed just such a program. So, Scott, can you take us through, first off, what's the name of your program?
Hey, Lindsay, this is OT in Context. It's otincontext.com, OT for Old Testament. And it came out of a whole bunch of different things. I guess the shortest version is between my personal study and writing and prep for Sunday school classes that I would teach. There'd be a lot of times where I'd be trying to go, well, yeah, I've heard of these different people, but what's an Amalekite, what's a Hivite and a Hittite and all. Um, and even if you know who they are, where are they from? And well, why don't I see these people here? Well, they didn't exist during that time period. And so I get all these books and thoughts and notes, and how does it all go together? And that to have all these books open on my desk, archaeology and theology and everything, and putting post-it notes and trying to build a mental map that ties it all together, it works a bit, and I'm sure I envy the seminary or OT profs, whatever, that probably have that all locked in, but that is not me. I'm getting there, but I need a way that I can link it all together that it makes sense for me. So I couldn't find something that did what I wanted, and I thought, well, I know a bit of programming. Let's see what I can build. So that's what I'm building, and I've kind of gotten stuck, and I just keep on building and building. So that's
That's
where I'm at
great.
now.
Yeah,
Keep on
so for
adding
me, I
bricks
would
to
have
it.
like a pegboard with, like a pin
Yeah, looks
board,
like
and
a
it
crime
looked
scene.
like
Yeah,
a conspiracy theory,
exactly.
with all the lines and
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It makes for some great pictures.
right. Yeah. So show us what OT in context does.
So I'll show you a quick. I'll try and do a quick overview here. So the thing I had envisioned through this whole thing is held together by this what I call a timeline slider here. So this bar down here is a slider that goes from 3500 BC to zero. So think everything before Christ, all Old Testament history. Well, I shouldn't say all. Um, let's say Tower of Babel on.
Okay.
Before that, certainly it's true, certainly it's documented and all that, but scripture isn't talking about time and all that in the same sense. And there isn't the same degree of history and architecture or archaeological finds and all that. So, before that, there's really not a whole lot to specifically see and talk about beyond scripture. I wanted something that was for all the more documented things that we can study. So 3500 BC on is down here. As you can see, I'm at 2315. And because, especially the farther back you go, when you give a date, you're giving a range. We don't know exactly the year of everything. There's certain times where we can get quite specific, building of the temple and things like that. But because of this, I've got this plus or minus down here. So we can see we're right now at 2315 plus or minus 125 years. So on the map, so that's a timeline slider. Then I've got three primary views. The map shows us whatever you happen to have turned on in these layers, and I'll turn on ancient cities for a minute. So these are the cities that existed in 2315 BC. So this is well before Abraham even. Let me zoom out here so you can see we've got Egypt, and I'll show you what I use in Sunday school. Oops, I'll leave that on. When I work in Sunday school, I usually show people this is the ancient Near East. This is the world of the Old Testament. This is
Mm-hmm.
maybe they didn't know about these things, these places specifically, but eventually through the end of the Old Testament, these are the kind of places that kind of come up. The major divisions are, you have the Fertile Crescent here where most things happened, the desert wilderness, and the lands beyond the mountain areas. And then you get into smaller regions, the Shfela, the Upper Nile, the Lower Nile, the wilderness, the Arabian Desert, the Levant. So you can, if you're trying to understand what's the coastal plain, or the Philippines in the coastal plain or whatever, you can get a sense of what these geographical regions that didn't change over time. And then these areas here, you can see these cities map out. I turn this back on. Oops, in the Fertile Crescent, because even before Abraham, people needed to be near water. So it just kind of maps out that way, kind of interestingly. But as we move through time, you'll see cities come and go. So let's get up well into occupation, Israel's occupation. And now we get a whole lot more popping up in here. Let me turn it on and back up. I have to refresh here. Just And you see them keep on coming. They're colored to show you how certain we are. Like Jerusalem, we know where Jerusalem is. Do we know where Ai is? Well, there's different theories. So the colors show you how certain we are of that location. But these are just the sites. And let me just, before I show you other layers, the three views that I mentioned are the map here, the timeline. So when I was on the map, I was at 928 BC. I switched and we're still at the same time. And 928 is going to be right down the center. And when I said plus or minus 125, so there's 125 years before and 125 years after. So you can see here's when David defeats the Philistines. And this is another reason I made this app, because, okay, so I have a general idea of biblical history, but how does the world fit? Like, oh, so Homer is writing here. Foundation of Carthage. You get up a little bit farther. Oh, that's when Aristotle lived. Like, oh, this is interesting. That turns out that the world of the Bible and the world of the ancient Near East are the same world, same history. So all these kind of things are here as events. These here show you chapters in Scripture, so you can see not necessarily when they were written, although sometimes they were, but the period recorded them is 1 Kings 16 covers this period here, which is kind of a fun thing to see. Down here, this is a period in, I guess you call it redemptive history, or the general big picture of Scripture. Are they in the wilderness? Are they in Egypt? Are they in exile? So that's what this block is here. Down here, you can scroll and see who is the king of each of these different biblical or biblical adjacent lands at that time. And any of these things we can see, you can also click on. So here's Ashurnazarpal second, and you can read about him and then link to other kings and to his empire and to other Nimrod and Judah, whatever. So you can see the interaction with other people and lands. I should mention, too, all of these entities, and I've got around 2,000 of them right now, over 1 million words that are in here so far. They're all guardrailed to historic confessions and a number of other things. So it's using modern scholarship. It's using peer-reviewed archaeology, not just any crazy theories in here. Same goes for theology and everything else. It's got to be guardrailed. But it's also it allows for differences between different interpretations of what might the Exodus route have been. Where was Mount Sinai? Which era, or what was the true Mount Ararat? As long as people hold to the fundamentals of Scripture, the confessions, all these kind of things, they're biblical maximalists. Okay, fine. We'll consider and present these different views. If you're hostile to Scripture, but you're a recognized scholar, okay, well, not that interested in what you have to say about Scripture, but if you've got something to say about archaeology, well, we're going to include what you say, but it's also going to say in here, it's going to be very clear, while this person doesn't recognize the authority of Scripture or the truth of Scripture, they do have something to say about this site. So that's how the
scholarly
text is figured. I'm sorry?
Scholarly, biblical, peer-reviewed.
Yeah.
And with an emphasis toward faithful scholarship.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep. And that should be quite clear in the descriptions. And even when it comes to some theologians or whatever, where you go, okay, they're generally good, but they do have this, whether it's JEDP or whatever, some kind of quirky thing that they have that doesn't take them out of being a contender, but they've got kind of a weird area. They might be included, but a flag will be on there. So anyway, you can see all this here. There's also, if you want to know what periods mean, like the Iron Age in one region is not the same as the Iron Age in another region. So this shows you the different regions, the different Egyptian dynasties, things like that, if you're interested in that. Lifespans shows you as people who are mentioned in Scripture and outside of Scripture, like I mentioned, Homer, Mark Antony, people like that exist in history that you might want to see where they line up. So those are all in this view. Right down here, so this is the track of archaeological finds of artifacts.
Okay.
So here, this is a four-horned altar from Tel Dan. So we found I say we, I wasn't involved, but that's how we talk, right?
Yeah.
There's a four-horned altar was found in Tel Dan, which is fascinating. because I mean it's recorded in Scripture and we found it. It's neat to read about that or see a video, but when did that happen in history? Where was Dan? If you don't know, it's the northern extent. You can see that on the map in a second. But here it shows you, if you look down here, it'll say when we found it, but this is putting it on the map of when it was in use. So you can see on the time, so we've got map view, timeline view, and then the Bible view. And I've got 3 ways to look at the Bible. These are kind of like your major headings. I think a children's storybook Bible kind of thing. The big things that a lot of people know about. The big titles, these are all featuring David in this time period, plus or minus 100 years from 900 BC. It's showing those major events here. And it gives you a key verse from that time, related chapters in the Bible if you want to look it up. If you go to books, this kind of shows you all of for each book that has chapters in this time span, they're shown here. Okay. This here, full chronology, is my favorite one. Take all 929 chapters of the Old Testament, tear them out, and put them back together chronologically. It's kind of like a harmony that got, you used to seeing that in the New Testament, but sure. It's kind of like a harmony of the Old Testament. So here, of course, in Samuel, they're going in order. But once you get up into the prophets, here we go. Kings, Chronicles, and Hosea. Well, it's not immediately obvious when you're reading Scripture how they go. But once you know who's writing and who they're writing to and when, all of a sudden, like, oh, that's why you're so ticked off at Assyria. Okay, I get it. I see what's happening now.
Right. So when I was recently doing a Genesis study, we wanted to look at the maps and see precisely what people groups were at war with whom and how that would track actually through history.
Yeah. Let me show you one thing here, then I'll switch the map. When I click on a chapter, it expands it so I can read it here. And it also shows you, kind of like a good study Bible, these are entities, places, people, archaeological artifacts, if they haven't been mentioned. Anything that's in this chapter, you can click on them over here. If you wonder about, he was 16 years when he began to reign, I want to know more about that. When I highlight this portion of Scripture, or if I highlight a portion of a description I want to know more about, and I click Ask for Context, it brings up this biblical question assistant I've made. It's an AI, a large language model, but it's locked into the entities that I've written, the million words that are in here, as well as the approved scholars. So you're not going to hear crazy answers. You're not going to hear, well, nobody's really sure if the Exodus happened. When you ask this question, you're going to get a live answer. It's not just a Google query. It's an answer just created in the 20 seconds it takes or whatever. And it will have all these links you can hop around to. So if you want to know any more information about, tell me more about this assassination. If there's any more information in that we know of, that should probably surface it. But on your map question, let me go back here, switch to the map, and it still got us in the same year we left.
That's great.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, that's great. I love how you stay contextual with the time period that you're studying. That's awesome.
Yeah. Otherwise, you flip and you got the same problem that you have with books. Like, oh, well, what am I talking about now? So let me give you a quick overview of the layers. I showed you the ancient cities. I'm going to turn them off just because it's going to get busy. Mountains stay on because it turns out mountains are pretty persistent, darn it. So I'm going to turn on archaeological sites. So now if you hear about, Tel Arad or whatever, Tel Dan, we're just looking at the altar from Dan. Well, here is the archaeological site. There's all kinds of external references you can click on. You can get details about the site. Let me find a better one. Megiddo should be a good one. Here we go. Megiddo, just because better documented. Here you can see who worked the excavation. Here's for 14 years and last century in the 60 and 70, and then more recently Israel Finkelstein. So you can see who worked on it, all this kind of stuff. But that's the archaeological, because the archaeology and the ancient history are two different things. There's a significant overlap, but I wanted to keep them separate. So turn that off. Related, we got artifacts, and I'm adding artifacts. I'm not putting everything in here because there's a lot of stuff that's been found. But there are things like we've got a Balaam inscription. Well, doggone, the same guy that's in scripture as a prophet, he's mentioned as a seer on text that we found outside of the Bible.
Hmm.
Well, that's interesting. And, it's pretty crazy coincidence. The Bible came up with names of people that actually existed. Uh, so, all anytime for this period of history that we're looking at, any artifacts that date to that period are shown where they were found. So this just makes it kind of a more fun way to see, okay, great, this four-horned altar was found. I was telling you earlier we saw one in Tel Dan. Well, there was one in Tel Beersheba as well. And Dan's way up here, and there's one way down here. Both ends of Israel had these. Anyway, that's what that layer shows you. Modern cities, if you're just trying to get your bearings, you can see Damascus, Amman, Jerusalem, Cairo. Some of these existed in the ancient world as well, of course. We looked at these modern states. Similarly, if you're trying to understand how these spaces work today, that's what these lines are. So political boundaries will help with what you are talking about.
Okay.
And now we're kind of working in an odd spot in time. It's 634 BC. We're in between exiles. So here we just have Judah left. The northern kingdom's gone, right?
Wow.
So we've got the kingdom of Judah here, and the kingdom of Judah, we talk about it like it's a discrete entity, but it changes. I mean, not only by who's in charge, the shape of it, location, things move around, and we'll see that in a second. But you got Moab and Edom here, so you can see where they are. And even like Edom, they were very, they took advantage of what was going on. So they were, as Judah moved out, they moved in. And that's how we get Herod, the Idumean, which they act like he's a Jew, but he's not really a Jew. He just happened to move in there and pretend to be a Jew. But you can see here, well, this here is the Babylonian Empire, so that's why Judah went away.
Okay, yeah.
But let's come back. You're mentioning Genesis. Let's come back here. Here's Abraham's time around in here. So this is early Canaan. And we move our way up. And you see, so these are political entities. They're generally where these people were. And actually, this time in history, most of the stuff is happening over here. Here's a third dynasty war.
Okay.
Okay. So we got things, all Akkad and Sargon, all this kind of stuff over here. Hammurabi, we're talking about this period of time. Now we're in Abraham's life. Here, the Persian Gulf changed shape a bit. It's a very shallow Gulf. And this is all a big plain, and what was the coastline moved. So you'll read about places like where that was basically a coastal city, but today it's not. So it's confusing to see. So here you see Assyria starting to emerge up there in Abraham's time. And as we come down, here we go. Now Midian is popping up down here. And then up in here, you should see over to the west. I'll keep zoomed out so you can see. Over to the west, here we go, Goshen.
Oh.
So this is where Israel, let me turn on cities too, that might be useful. And just walk up through here a little bit. So here you can see the new kingdom of Egypt and see how Goshen lands in there. And this is super interesting once you see these kind of things. So this is Egypt proper, okay? It's the land around the Nile. This here, these are vassals under suzerain control of Egypt. So everybody out here during this period is controlled by Egypt. So when they leave during the Exodus, which is a little bit in the 100 years after this, right now we're in the time of the Hyksos. When they leave Egypt, they're leaving Egypt proper. They're leaving headquarters of where Pharaoh had the most control with his armies. But everybody out here, if they had trouble and needed help, they'd send a letter back to Egypt and say, we need help. And either they would send help or they would tell one of their other cities in the area to send their army to help. And we read about this in scripture. If you don't know the historic context of why are these people coming over to this to join the party? Well, it's because they're paying taxes back here as vassals during this period. So really, when they leave and during the Exodus and the conquest is finishing off. They are still battling Egypt essentially, because they are taking over Jericho, Ai, Hatzor. These are Egyptian strongholds. I mean, there are other independent city-states, but they're under the sovereignty of Egypt. So they're still continuing putting down Egypt, which is an interesting thing to think of theologically.
That's outstanding. So a lot of these political alliances that we read about that feel like
Mm-hmm.
just a whole smear of names and
Yeah.
relationships now start to take a little bit of shape
Oh
in your
man,
mind.
yeah. Once you start picking this stuff up and you read the Bible, all of a sudden all this stuff pops. Just like when you're learning theology, and all of a sudden you start seeing names. It's like, well, now I know why this guy's ticked off. Now he's threatened because of what had just happened before. And actually, if you see here, these guys up here, the Hittites, well, they're just minding their business up in Turkey, right? I mean, it's Anatolia, Turkey today. But as time continues, the Hittites grow huge, and all of a sudden they are the people. So they're starting to come down here, getting awful close to the home of the Israelites,
Knocking on the door of the
and
promised land.
absolutely, and no wonder we see the Hittites and the Egyptians fighting. Well, because they're both pushing, and this corridor here. So this is all desert out here. It's really nothing of much use. But everything west of, so here we've got you got Galilee down to the Dead Sea. So west of the Jordan, that's the highway. So if you're on a trade route, or if you need to take this army up to there, or vice versa, you're going through here. So everybody, the Jews didn't have to be proselytes. God was bringing everybody through the neighborhood. So they were going to hear about Yahweh just because of how God set it up geographically even. So people are coming through here regardless of what's going on. So when you read in Scripture during this same time period, flip over to the Bible view, and you'll see the same things happening during this time period. Like, oh, that's why these guys are coming on over here, why they're ticked off. And you can see here, you were saying before, over in Numbers here, not Genesis, but you can see the relevant passages. But if we come back to the map, you'll see this is in the time of the Judges, or early time of the Judges. You've got they're well into the conquest, and they've got their initial tribal allotments. So you can see all these different places. You read pretty quickly Simeon disappears because they were fully encompassed by Judah. So eventually they just kind of lose their identity because they're inside of Judah. So you see that happen, and you understand why that happened in Scripture. Dan moves from the south to the north. As the Assyrians come in, and later the Babylonians, you see these different lands getting picked off. Here, the Philistines just came in. The sea peoples come in, and this gets bigger and bigger, and then under David, it shrinks down again. So it's just a fascinating way. Here we now see the divided kingdom, the northern and southern. The Philistines are starting to get put down. Ammon is popping up out here. A fun thing to add here too, in these layers, and the political boundaries still on, and come to here. Instead of just a white background to kind of take away distractions, we can turn on the satellite, and let's turn on terrain for some more fun. So now, as we're coming down into here, well, I'll show you in here, it's kind of fun. These here are some of the hills that David hid from Saul. He never got, in all his running, he never got like more than 20, 25 miles away. And you can see some of the places he hid and why it was easy to hide there. And under this, you can exaggerate the terrain more. This is obviously way more than reality. This is double the reality, but it makes the terrain pop a little more, so you can understand where the different mountains were. Here's the Oaks of Mamre, where Abraham meets God. But it just makes it a fun way to look at all this stuff. And let me turn off satellite and just look at relief. Here we can see just colored based on the elevations. It's not long to show right now. There we go. So if you're interested in where did the crossing, the Red Sea crossing, happen? Well, it's deeper over here than it is here. Right? You go ahead and play with your own favorite theories. But this is just a different way of visualizing the terrain. But yeah, that's just a quick. I say quick, but it didn't maybe seem quick. Let me show you one more thing here. Got historical routes. So during this period, here's three of the. Wait, that shouldn't. Yeah, sorry. This is the King's Highway. This is the Via Maris, Way of the Sea, and this here was the Way of Shur through the desert. But I meant to come back here. If we come to 1466 or so, we should see. There we go. So here are the some of the some of the leading theories as to the Exodus route. Here's the deep south route going through what's traditionally thought of as Mount Sinai. Some other contenders, Laz and El Tarif. But there's all these different routes. So you can see, come back here again. Here, this would have been the route Abram took as his pit stop in Haran, and then comes back down to Canaan. So these routes are in here as well. And all this is data I'm always trying to add to, but there's a bunch in here, and always more coming.
Awesome. So, practical questions. Is this something that you're offering on a subscription model?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the basic level is free.
Okay.
You can see the maps. Let me switch this over so you can see what free looks like. So the standard program looks like this. You can turn on, and you can see the white layer. You can't see the satellite, whatever. You can see terrain colored, but you can't see the 3D views. It's just a straight down.
Okay.
And you can see what's grayed out here. So certain layers, certain aspects of scripture, ways of seeing scripture, certain parts of the timeline, you don't see the rulers here for free. But there's a whole lot in here you can still see that it helps with context.
Okay.
And again, I'm just trying to understand what is the context of scripture. How can we better understand it? So there are these 3 different tiers that give you more and more access. So you can add, like, to these notes that we see over here about a particular area on the higher tier. Now you can add your own notes. If you want to, in your own private study, you want to add a note about David or about an event or about a place, something you found in your own study, you can add it here and keep your own notes in here. But yeah, the tiers all have different levels of access and control. I've got a tour feature I made, if you think, kind of a cross between playlists on YouTube and maybe PowerPoint production. If you don't want to be fumbling through things, you can define these views and see these dates, the layers that are on, all this stuff will change. So you can just use this in a podcast or in a Sunday school class, whatever. So I've used this in Sunday school where I was teaching why geography matters. And I just went through some of these different examples. So I could just hit next and just go to these illustrations that I wanted to use and speak about. Here's when they first crossed, the first crossing of the Jordan to Gilgal and Jericho. So it's just a fun way to, or an easy way to share things in Sunday school or presentation.
Yeah, that looks super helpful. So is there a version of this that sits natively on my computer, or is this something that's online? Totally.
It's online only because there's just so much data. It's a combination of server side and client side. So there's all this data and everything is on a server, because to try and download all this terrain and 3D topography and all these places to your phone or your computer would be pretty overwhelming. So it keeps a lot of it there, and then it also does things for speed on your computer. So because of that, you have to be online.
Okay.
But it's if you go to the website, it's what's called a progressive web app. And if you use an Android, you can actually click on your browser and say install this as an app. So as far as you can tell, using it on a phone, it looks and feels like an app as long as you've got access. And an iPhone is not much different. You're just going to save the bookmark essentially, and then when you load it up, it'll feel like you're in an app pretty much.
Okay. Well, Scott, this looks amazing. It looks like a tool that can be used in Sunday school. It can be used in home Bible studies. It can be used in your personal study. And the free tier is a great stepping stone in.
Yep.
And then what are the tiers that are beyond the free tier?
There's it's called Standard, Plus, and Pro, and it just gradually adds. There is, if you go to otncontext.com/pricing, or actually when you're using it, anytime you run into one of these gates here, it will say, let me switch over here. It will say, do you want to unlock this? Let me switch in Standard here. So here's a good example. So I can see details about this particular mountain in the free version. There's nothing blocking that. I want people to be able to read about it. There's videos that you can watch. That's all free. If you go to details, it'll say you have to upgrade to Plus for that particular feature.
Got you.
So you can see and compare plans and see all the different features that you get at each level.
That's great.
I didn't mention here. I was talking about the like the artifacts and things that are shown. This button up here is something that if I click on that, it will show me any videos that are available, things that I've added in. I gotta turn the layers on. And I gotta switch this to Pro. Okay, so anytime you see this little play icon, that means there's a video, something related to an artifact, a city, an archaeological site, something. But what's nice about this is instead of just watching a disconnected YouTube video where they're talking about, then you can actually zoom in here to see the actual place where they were found, kind of explore while you're watching the video. Just makes it a whole lot more interesting because you can see actually with the Amarna letters, you can see the old temple complexes and things where they found them, which is kind of fun context to add in while you're watching a video.
Sure. Scott, you've done an incredible amount of work on this. How long did this take you to get?
Oh gosh, I've been on and off for about a year and a half. You know, start and then come to a whole different way of approaching it, and then start again from scratch. And so it's kind of now it's just an ongoing thing that to keep on adding things and fix bugs.
The name is perfect, right? OT in
Yeah,
context. Context matters so much for our understanding. We get these disconnected facts, you know?
yeah,
And
yeah,
what you've done is really draw those strings together into one place so that we can really have that context and have that
yeah,
knowledge. So really
yeah. And
appreciate that,
that's
Scott.
what it did for. That's what kind of got me a lit a fire for me because how often do you go, man, I got to go home and read Leviticus, or that I got to go check that chapter Habakkuk because that these are not things you normally say, but once you start to get some connection to them, like, oh, I kind of get it now. I want to read some more.
Yeah, I can see people really falling even more in love with studying the Bible because now they have color,
Yeah,
you know, that
good
that
way to
can
put
be
it.
added
Exactly.
to their understanding. So
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
great.